Hello, everyone. I'm clicking the buttons to welcome each of you. I'm glad there's so many. Fantastic. Everyone can hear me? Yes. Okay, awesome. I appreciate the thumbs up. Very useful. Thank you for that. Excellent. So I want to go ahead and just get started right away because I have a lot to share, and I want to make sure that I get to questions and I'm able to help you. So just for fun, if you don't mind, sorry, paying attention to everyone joining. Sorry. Very good. If you don't mind, just going ahead and sort of starting the chat by telling me or reminding me really where you're joining from. I had quite a fun time seeing where everyone was signing up from around the world. So if you just give me a little type in the chat, so I know that you're here and you're with me. That's fantastic. I am based in the States, as many of you know. I'm actually living in Pennsylvania right now, but on Eastern time. Noelle's from Canada. I remember speaking with you earlier this year. Thank you so much for being here. Um, it's a one-woman show, so bear with me as I juggle the folks joining and my notes here. Um, and I appreciate you coming from all over the world. Oh, someone's in Philadelphia. We're practically neighbors. India, fantastic. Thank you for showing up at this time of day. That's very impressive. I'm actually terribly impressed with all of you for being here and making time really to invest in your writing and improve this. I think it's absolutely amazing. So, oh, Manchester, UK, I love it. Um, we're here today for a 2-hour training on writing cosmetic industry news. I personally believe that writing is crucial to the success of the beauty industry. We need people just like you from all over the world to share useful information and to share your perspective as well. Uh, I believe that writing helps support collaboration in our industry. It helps support transparency and, of course, is useful in terms of innovation as well. Um, if we look at everyone online from all over the world, we have really a fantastic diversity of perspectives. And I know that the beauty industry needs your voice and folks from all around the world. So this is really lovely to see. I know some of you on the call today are scientists, some of you are marketing specialists. Others are professional journalists. Some are students. A real diversity of skill sets represented. And I want to assure you that whatever your expertise, there are beauty industry professionals ready to read your work. There's definitely value to be gained when each of you is courageously and consistently writing cosmetic industry news, whatever that looks like for you. What I'm teaching today applies to business content. So that's B2B blog posts. That could be articles or sponsored content for trade media. It applies to writing press releases as well as to text that you might include in a social media post. I'm going to guide you through 6 aspects of writing that pertain to all of those content formats. So as you saw in some of the promotional material, we will cover identifying news and trends. We'll cover framing news for your reader. We'll cover headlines, SEO, and first drafts. We'll talk about including definitions, details, and data in your work. We'll talk about doing desk research, interviews, and sharing commentary. And finally, we'll talk about finding your particular voice or your niche or your specialty within the industry. I think it's very important that I let you know that I am not interested in teaching people to write like me, right? We don't need a bunch of Deannas in the world. We need all of you. And I certainly don't want you to learn to write like each other either. I think there is really something to be gained by sharing your particular voice. So I very much appreciate your individuality, and I hope that's clear. Oh, I want to make sure that I mention every one of you who stays on the Zoom call with me here for our 2-hour session will have the chance to do a free one-on-one call with me. We'll take time today for questions in the chat, as well as if I talk fast enough, we'll have time at the end to open it up and have some real dialogue together. But I imagine you'll have other questions that are more particular to your work on sort of a granular level. And so I want to give you the chance to schedule a private call with me, and I'll share how you can make that happen later on in our call. I'll quickly introduce myself for those of you who don't know my work, and for those of you who do, some of you I know are quite familiar with me. I have to say I'm terribly flattered that you've shown up. Um, so I really appreciate that. I started writing news for the cosmetic and personal care industry a little over 10 years ago. I began with a publication called Cosmetics Design, and that was writing daily news, covering ingredients, covering manufacturing, packaging, brand innovations, really everything on the B2B side of the industry, financial news, all sorts of things. I wrote as many as 4 articles every day. I mention that because it was a very digital paced publication. And it was a very sort of accelerated education into writing cosmetics industry news, as well as into the industry at large for me. I conducted a lot of video interviews, particularly at trade shows, did a lot of public speaking there. I started at Cosmetics Design as a writer, just a basic reporter position, but was promoted over time to serve as editor of that publication. I will tell you, before that job, I had never worked in beauty before. I was not familiar with the industry. I had no particular expertise. I don't have a science background. It was all very new to me. And I think maybe a week or 10 days after I started, I had to hit the button on my computer to publish articles I was writing, and they went out to over 60,000 industry professionals. So I was ridiculously nervous. I felt like I had no idea what I was talking about. But I was pleasantly surprised in that I came to realize that readers very much appreciated my articles and my perspective on the industry, which is something I heard over and over again. As I mentioned earlier, I don't want you to learn to write like in one unified voice. And I think one of the compliments I have heard over time about my work is that there's something distinctive, and that I'm sharing a bit of my unique perspective on the industry. And so I think that's very valuable for each of us to do. I gained a lot of exposure and access through that job, and I want to say that exposure to the industry and access to various experts is something you can pick up whether you have sort of a conventional job like I did with a trade media publication, or if you're doing it completely on your own or somewhere in between. So it's not, you're not limited by whatever sort of circumstance you find yourself wanting to write. I think it's important to mention that writing not only helps your reader, as we can imagine, but it helps you, right? It's going to help your career. And I think it's a terrific opportunity for learning. It's one of the things I still love to this day about it is I get to learn really cool new stuff all the time. It builds awareness of you and your work or your company, whatever you're focused on. And it's also like, I think the biggest thing is that it's a significant opportunity to make a real contribution, and it's a fulfilling contribution to the industry. Today, I'm the editor of the Beauty Insights newsletter, which I launched in 2021. That's a once-a-week resource for trade media editors, cosmetic scientists, brand leaders, industry allies. I've slowed down, right? I'm not writing 4 articles a day, which is quite refreshing. I write the Global Perspectives column for Eurocosmetics magazine. I developed and host the Cosmo Factory podcast, which is produced by the team at Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna. I think it's their tagline sometimes in material, but I honestly believe it is our industry's most important trade show. So I'm very proud to be a part of that. And I do work for other trade shows and supply side clients as well. But all of my work has an element of writing. I can't imagine you need to know more about me, but if you have questions already, feel free to add them in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get into these 6 aspects of writing cosmetic industry news that I want to share with you. As I said, the first aspect we're going to cover is identifying news and trends, really how you might choose a topic to write about. This is usually where I start my work. I think it's important to sort of recognize that wherever you sit, right, whether you are someone who might be described as an industry insider, whether you work in sort of a cosmetic adjacent industry, right? Maybe you're a specialty chemical specialist, maybe you're in clinical testing, whatever it is, you have a unique perspective on the industry, right? Think of yourself as an industry observer. You have a good view on at least some sector of the industry. You're clearly interested in something about beauty, and really start there. Don't be shy to sort of claim the expertise you have simply from where you sit. Of course, events, right? So trade shows are terrific opportunities to discover topics and ideas that you might want to share in news or with your readers. Um, Press releases, right? These are materials that are being presented as news, always a useful place to look. Um, Oftentimes you have to look beyond the press release to expand, but that's true in any of these, right? If you make an observation from where you sit in the industry, you're going to have to gather more information. We'll talk about that. Um, one of my favorite ways to find or choose topics has to do really with just individuals, right? I do a lot of listening. I have a lot of conversations with folks in the industry, and as fun as it is for I've always thought it was quite fun to get to speak with very senior executives or very specialized professionals in our industry who are like so expert in their particular niche. Like I find that really enchanting. And I would encourage any of you to literally talk to anyone, just as I'm suggesting, whatever your perspective is on observing the industry having value, you can learn from almost anyone. It's really I think it's a listening skill and just being open. And I will say too, I think it's important to be a careful listener, especially if you've been in the industry for a while. I think it can be very easy for folks to assume they've seen it before, assume they know what's happening, assume that the pattern is the same, that yeah, that they know, right? That we sort of get familiar and we start to assume that that we know what's going on, or like I said, that it's a repeated pattern, or we've seen this before. There's a lot of eye rolling, I think, in the industry at times, and I would encourage you not to do that, but to continue to try to listen and have conversations with really fresh eyes and fresh ears. Um, a lot of my work has often felt as if I'm simply sharing what other people have told me. And I encourage people all the time to share information with me because I really don't know what's happening unless people tell me. And I think you have to uh, I feel cheesy saying it, right? But it's almost a take that humble approach, right? And recognize that you can learn from anyone at, sort of at any level of the industry, the most novice to the most expertise. Of course, reading is very useful for finding topics. And this can be anything, right? This can be news that we think of that fits in our industry. This can be information that comes from outside of our industry. I think about a couple interviews I did for the Cosmo Factory podcast. I spoke with a very senior formulator a couple months ago, and he spoke quite highly of the value of, looking at various branches of science that you might think have nothing to do with beauty, including, space travel. I spoke, of course, with trend forecasters and what have you for the podcast as well, and they're very much looking at our societal cultures very broadly. So don't be shy to recognize what you're reading or even enjoying in media outside of the industry as relevant to our industry. Certainly the consumer is not only a beauty consumer. And the same is true of business to business customers, right? As much as we put our heads down at our desk and focus on our specialty, it's very important to recognize that, the world at large is useful. And when I say reading too, I think it's important to include your own team's research or your own research. Feel free to draw on those sorts of, published materials for news that you might share in another format. That can be very helpful. So I guess, the note I would make here in terms of choosing a topic, right? Identifying a trend from whichever one of these sources you're looking at, is what's exciting or interesting to you. I think is a very good place to start. And it can be useful because if it's exciting to you, it's definitely going to be exciting to someone else, right? I think we have a much more shared experience than we recognize at times. And this is true even with what we might think of as the most serious business content. So if if you're curious about it, someone else is curious about it. If you're excited by it, someone else is excited about it. If you're upset about it, someone else is upset about it. So feel free to sort of follow that. Uh, don't get carried away, of course, but I think those sorts of just emotional cues or interest cues can be really useful. And then just go ahead and choose a topic that makes sense. If you have questions on this concept, feel free to add those in the chat. You can chat to me privately, or you can chat openly to the group. Um, like I said, I will try to have time at the end for a Q&A, but I do like to talk, so I hope I don't step on our time. Um, so I am going to share a few little exercises throughout our time together today. So if you want to open a new document on your computer now or take out a fresh sheet of paper, I'll give you just a couple minutes to actually, and just do this playfully, right? Right, as playfully as you can, or what makes sense. Or if you have a project in mind, of course, you can take it a little bit more seriously. But I would ask you now to just take a couple minutes and choose a topic, right? Find something that you might want to write about. We won't leave the training with a finished article, but you will have gone through, some key steps here in terms of developing a news item. So yeah, go ahead if you want to Google press releases, if you've already observed something, if you're, particularly excited to see something at a trade show, if there's research you're doing or something you've read, and go ahead and write out that topic and maybe mention in your notes where you found it, right? Which one of those strategies you used to select your topic. Um, checking chat, checking chat. Very good. Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm going to refresh myself. Yeah, excellent. So I don't see any questions on this topic. I am going to go ahead and move on to the second aspect, but feel free if you do have questions on that or anything that comes up, or even something I don't cover, feel free to leave those notes for me. That will be very helpful. The next aspect that I want to talk about is then framing this news for your reader. The first thing I think that it's important to recognize when you're framing news for a reader is who you're actually writing for. It can be very helpful to think about this in both sort of big picture terms. Maybe you're writing for, maybe you're writing for cosmetic scientists, right? That's sort of your general audience. But then, who are you writing for? Are you writing for, a scientist who is looking for new clinical data? Are you writing for someone who um, might be a new scientist, and they're looking to learn not only about recent launches, but really just sort of catch up with what goes on in the industry, maybe how formulation happens or these sorts of things. So start to think big picture about who you're writing for. It can also be very helpful if you have a fair amount of industry experience or you know where you want to land in the cosmetic industry, to actually identify a person. Almost, maybe it's someone you would email, maybe it's someone you know from your work, and literally think about them as you're starting to frame your news. What does this person need to know, right? Why am I writing? I think these are very important questions to answer for yourself, so that you can share the right information about whatever topic you've chosen. It's really going to dictate how you shape the news. And do think about what your reader wants to know, or even what they need to know. Consider what you need to share, right? Whether we like to admit it or not, we have an agenda with our work. If you're promoting a consultancy or something, for instance, you might, want to take care to very much highlight the sort of material that would be important to your customer, or to someone who would be curious about working with you. Think about also not only what you need to share, what's important from your business perspective, but think about what should your reader know, right? What do they need to know about your business, or about what they're working on? And in terms of framing as well, I think it's super important to think about why the topic matters. Um, when I look to my own work, a lot of the articles I write do have to do with new ingredient technologies. Um, and sometimes it matters because it's simply a new ingredient technology. Sometimes it matters, and this is a very general understanding of why it might matter, but sometimes it matters for environmental sustainability reasons. Sometimes it matters more for regulatory reasons. There was a change and we need this sort of alternative ingredient. So there can be lots of reasons why the topic matters. And again, that might change based on who your reader is or um, what your reasoning is for writing, right? If you're working for a conventional company and you need to be promoting material, the sort of the way you might approach something and why a topic matters might be different. Um, you might take a bit of a different approach. I think it's also important as you're framing the news, you want to think about where your reader is, and maybe not so much geographically, although I suppose that might influence it a bit. But you want to think about what content format makes sense for your goals, right? What platform um, is right, where are they already reading things, right? Do they go to trade media? Do they go to blogs, right? Is this a customer? Do you sell ingredients and this is a customer? If you're a manufacturer, are they already coming to your site and you're ready to offer them content in maybe a blog format? That will help dictate the way that you frame it. You want to make sure that the content format makes sense for your goals. And I think it's also important to make sure that you're on a platform that is most authentic to you. Um, if you're looking to you know, if you're a blogger, then your work should show up on a blog, right? Some blog writers are not necessarily going to also be sharing news in conventional trade media publications, or not necessarily going to be maybe you don't want to be on Instagram or that sort of thing. So you want to make sure it's a very authentic space for you. I've always considered myself a fairly serious voice. I'm trying to learn to have more fun. But I am very comfortable on LinkedIn. And so I share a lot of short news items on that platform. It makes sense to me. I also know that the reader I'm trying to reach tends to be there pretty regularly. It's very much a business to business audience. So it's worth thinking about that in terms of starting to frame up your topic. If we look back at the topic that you've chosen and added for your exercise, um, here I would ask you to think about the needs and challenges of your reader, right? Maybe focus on the topic, but maybe even step back from it and just ask yourself, who are you writing for, right? But why do they read news? When they're reading a blog, a social post, maybe an article or a press release, what are they looking for, right? A lot of news is around newness, right? What's new, what wasn't happening yesterday. Some folks are reading very much to discover something new. Other people are looking, especially, to make sense of trends. Some folks are looking really to gather data. They're interested in facts and numbers and these sorts of details. Other readers are looking maybe for policy changes. I know some readers are looking to discover new partners or new opportunities within their business. Of course, folks in the industry like to observe what's going on with their competitor set, so that's interesting. Some readers are really looking to be inspired, and that can be a reader in any sort of role. Some readers are looking to save time, right? There's a lot of news, there's a lot of media. They're looking for a format that makes sense, but it could be something else. It might not be on this list. So I would encourage you to write down what your reader is looking for when they read news. If you want to share that in the chat, or if anyone wants to share the topic that they identified earlier, that could be quite fun to see the perspective there as well. I'll give you just a moment to think that through. Yeah. But do if you have a topic or you have something you want to share, it could help me make sure that I'm speaking to writing that makes sense for you. If you want to share your topic, if you want to share what your reader cares about, that could be useful for me to see in the chat as well and help me know that you're still here with me. Thank you so much. I'll give you just a moment there. Oh, lovely. Thank you, Sophia. Um, this is fun. So someone's writing about advancements in AI tech in the beauty industry. So yeah, this is a tremendous topic. This could be a book, but but I love it. There's so much interesting work going on in terms of artificial intelligence technology. I'm hoping to do an interview for the podcast very soon. That's focused on ingredient development technology that's using artificial intelligence. That's a super fun topic for sure. Um, let's see. Oh, yes. Avery, I know. That's your topic, right? Science, immunology, and skincare. I love it. Perfect. That makes very good sense. And that's a great example. It aligns with your research in particular, but it aligns, with the products you develop. It's a good big picture focus, right? And there's so much within that you could develop out. Let me read this one. If it's a general audience, I'm thinking that it is mostly about making the information accessible and easily understandable. Absolutely. This is like super important. I think, our job in writing is very much to share information, but to share it in a way that it can actually be digested. There's always so many food metaphors in the world, whether it's fashion or writing. People are always saying food things, but definitely something that's easily digested. And that's something I am really grateful to have heard people say about my work over the years is how accessible it is, not only to specialists in whatever field I'm writing about, but to a more general audience as well. And we'll definitely get to some of the aspects of why that is working for me. And I hope you can make it work for you as well with some of the other aspects of writing that we'll cover. Someone wants to write about dealing with acne and natural ingredients. That's fantastic. Again, a very good umbrella focus to get started with. I'm not sure who my reader is yet. That's okay, right? When I started at Cosmetics Design, even though I'm sure the company had a very strong avatar as to who was reading the news daily, I had no idea who I was writing for. I did not know what was out there. So I think that's the right place to start. Absolutely. Um, navigate the noise of the industry with so many products. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is like super there is so much to say, which I have to say, honestly, like I don't want to say that I ever felt like it was my job to write about the whole industry. In fact, one of the things I've very much appreciated through my years writing is how all of us, right? So many trade media editors or trade media journalists and freelancers who are working in the same space, we're all doing the same work, but we're doing it differently. And together, right, we're covering the industry. There is more than enough, right? There is so much going on here. So there's definitely, yeah, definitely sorting through the noise in the industry is quite useful. Someone wants to cover sun care topics here. I'm developing a sunscreen, perfect. Mineral and chemical filters. I want to develop an ideal mineral sunscreen, affordable mineral, not nano. See, so this is good. So this is very niche. And you can then sort of speak about a number of connected, topics. You might, yeah, there's so much there. That's fantastic. Do you think the safety of cosmetics is still very important? I appreciate all these comments. I appreciate that there's too many for me to keep up with quickly. So let me just keep going through. Um, Given the fact that clean skincare has been controversial, my own concern is the safety of daily use of sunscreen products. Yeah, so safety is always important. And I think one of the reasons safety is important is that it's always going to be relevant for consumers in the cosmetics and personal care industry, but it's also it always will be very important to everyone on the supply side of the industry too. Um, these companies care deeply about what they develop. The individuals on the team are very focused. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to share really good information, to learn more from whatever sector of the industry makes sense for your reader and share that. Absolutely. I think one of the important things with safety and other sorts of science topics, is accuracy, and we definitely will get to attribution and data. Yeah. Ucha is giving me the thumbs up on that. Safety is super important. Mojgan claims and regulation for products and cosmetic. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Regulatory topics will always be of interest. Regulations are changing quite often, and they are a huge driver of change and innovation in our industry. So definitely a lot going there. Natural alternatives for synthetic retinols. Again, yeah, nice sort of specific topic, but in terms of alternatives, for synthetics or alternatives for fossil fuel derived ingredients, always great topics. The preservative conundrum, yeah, we can do that. Acceptable choices, suitable alternatives, chemical averse. Yeah. Uh, I think when we talk about chemicals in the industry, depending on your reader, again, you want to be very sensitive here and make sure that you're sharing information accurately. Everything is made up of chemicals. And so it's very important to, if you're talking about even, some sort of expression like chemicals of concern or chemical, uh, allergy, allergens or some sort of, find some way to sort of contextualize it so that you're sharing, accurate information. There's no such thing as chemical-free beauty. And I know you're not saying that, but just seeing the word chemical, there's always careful work to be done there. How to keep products safe. Exactly. We love water. One of our favorite chemicals. Awesome. Fantastic. So I really appreciate all that engagement. This is fantastic. Um, so I'm scrolling through my notes. I'm doing my best to go through the material very quickly, and I hope it's still useful. It seems like you're following along quite nicely, and I very much appreciate it. I think this sort of what we might call as micro learning is a really good way to get started. Sorry, still trying to learn my chat. Okay. Um, and especially, if you're interested in developing or improving your skills and confidence to writing cosmetic industry news, I always find when I'm learning something, like I want it in these little bites and segments like this at first, and then I'll go sleep on it. Maybe it's one night, maybe it's a week, and my brain will do something really useful with it. And I can sort of continue that learning. So I think it's a really great way to start. But I do want to mention in February, I'm actually going to teach a 5-day course on writing cosmetic industry news. So we'll have more time then to go into detail. I can respond to your feedback that you give me from today's training. So that could be I can make sure that it's more tailored to what you're expecting and hoping to learn. If you have particular needs or challenges, I can definitely build that into the training in February. So at this point, I'm putting together a wait list. I'm an outstanding writer, but a technical expert, I am not. So someone else is creating a registration link for me, and I will have that opportunity available for you soon. I think we've done the framing the news exercise. Yeah, but I just wanted to let you know that there is another training coming up in February. Let's see, I have a new chat. Food materials or chemicals? Of course, chemicals. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We always want to just be mindful about the terminology that we use for sure, and use it in a way that is, accurate, both for the news we're sharing, but also understandable and makes good sense for our reader. The next topic I want to cover, and I'm trying to make sure I'm on pace here. The next aspect of writing I want to look at is headlines, SEO, which is search engine optimization, and first drafts. So I always hesitate, and I think this comes up for me every time I write an article, like so many times a week. But at some point in elementary school, I was taught that you write the headline last. And that's a good way. That's the good way to write. And I'm sure there are people who do this. I think it's a perfectly fine way to write. I do not write this way. And I feel somehow as if I'm transgressing every time I do it. But I'm going to still share sort of my strategy with you. When I'm considering writing a headline, one of the key things I do is make sure that I'm summarizing the topic, right? And doing it in a way that addresses, what we've talked about earlier in terms of framing news for your reader, in terms of making sure you know who your reader is, why they care, what it is, right? Five people might write about the same ingredient launch or the same, manufacturing facility opening, but if your reader is different, the headline needs to be different so that your reader knows that they're going to get something of value to their business or their curiosity that makes sense. So you want to summarize the topic, but you also want to make sure it's relevant for the platform you're on, for the reader that you have. A headline overlaps with search engine optimization. I can't imagine that there's any online publication that is poorly coded at this point, but the headline um, format on any publication bears significant weight in terms of search engine optimization. Uh, when a when your site gets crawled for search engine optimization, that's really the heaviest piece. So you want to make sure that there are terms that your reader would be looking for on a search. You'll see if you read my work, you will have heard or read the expression cosmetic and personal care industry over and over and over again, right? Hopefully not too much, but it's definitely a term, a phrase rather, that I know I want in there for search purposes, right? I am going to change it up from time to time. I, have used the expression beauty care. I talk about cosmetic ingredients. There's all sorts of different phrases, but uh, I'm always astonished when I look at an article about, cosmetic and personal care industry, anything, and it never says cosmetics. It never says personal care. It never says beauty industry. It never says anything that would help sort of those first sort of like entry level search terms, right? Of course, if you're writing about peptides, you need the word peptides sprinkled throughout and maybe in your headline and that sort of thing. But you definitely want to help your reader discover it through search. And that's something to consider for the headline for sure. Your headline, as I suggested, does need to take your audience very much into consideration. And what they care about, right? Is your audience an executive level reader who wants to know what the competition is doing and is going to, care that this company is opening a facility in this country and it costs this much money, or the square footage is this size, or maybe they're interested, maybe it's maybe your reader is more concerned with the capabilities that a company might have. Maybe that new manufacturing facility is bringing a capability to the North American marketplace that previously wasn't available there. So that's going to be a huge deal in terms of competition. Maybe that new facility is making a significant financial impact on a particular community, and your reader is more interested in sort of regional business news, right? So you want to think about why this is news, but why is it news for your reader, right? What's particular to your audience? And then, of course, the place of publication matters as well. You want to be mindful of any guidelines or sort of standards and best practices that a publication might have. There's a lot to consider with headlines. I can give you, a quick example from my own work. If you look at the Beauty Insights newsletter that I send each week, or if you follow my short news posts on LinkedIn, my headlines don't necessarily adhere to some of this advice that I'm giving you, right? My headlines in these pieces are not really search engine optimized. They do I would this will show you my personality maybe too much, but I would say in a playful way. They do summarize the topic. And sometimes I am Like I really enjoyed language. Again, one of the things I was really sort of happy to see as you were all signing up for this is like everyone's names. Like I really love words. Like there's just something about language and sort of the sounds and shapes and rhythm of words that I love it. And so like in many ways, at times I read my work and I think that I'm, too poetic for my own good. But in some ways, the short headlines I share on social media or in the Beauty Insights newsletter are very playful. Oftentimes they're just a couple words. Sometimes it's a few more. And I've chosen to do that. Of course, at some point I might choose to change it, but I've chosen to do that because the reader I'm reaching in those two places for me is not necessarily a reader who's discovering me. It's a reader who's familiar with my work, sort of knows my tone, is either they see something from me and they know they want to read it because they appreciate my perspective, or they don't. I'm not saying people don't discover my news through those channels, but that's not my goal, right? I'm not looking to create that. I'm speaking to an audience that I already have, and it's a little cheeky. And I'll be honest, my audience maybe could be larger if I took a different approach. But so think about what makes sense for you and your goals in terms of headline development. This calls for a lozenge. It's going to be a long go here. Um, So thinking about search engine optimization then a little more specifically, as I said, it does matter in headlines. Headlines have the heaviest weight. So you want to be putting search terms that make sense for your audience, for your topic, for your business purposes in the headline. You don't want to do it in a way that is trying to cheat the system, right? You wouldn't write cosmetic ingredients 3 times in your headline just because you really want the search results. That's not going to help you, right? The technology is much more clever than that. Again, if your content management system or publishing platform is set up appropriately, headlines will have the heaviest weight with search. Subheadings will have descending weight. So if you have a secondary heading, if you have a tertiary heading, all the way down, they will diminish in weight, but they will still be given more weight than the body text of an article. Now, if your site for some reason is not coded in that way, search will do its best to understand what your headline is and what the text is. But if it's not coded, most of your text will come across as body text. So it will all have the same level of weight, which it's a lost opportunity. So again, I can't imagine any of you using a system that's a platform that doesn't have that support, but it's worth considering. Links within your text are also a very useful place for search. Anything that's hot linked or hyperlinked in online news will have more weight with search as well. It's very important there to think about the literal words that you are linking, because that's going to help not only a link in your content is going to tell the search engine that this other site is somehow relevant or important, that you have some sort of relationship. How well they can figure out what that relationship is or what to do with it in terms of returning search results is going to vary. So you want to help not only your reader understand why this link is worth clicking on, if it is, but also you want to help search understand what that relationship is, what's interesting here. So hundreds of different writers, for instance, could write about a specialty chemical ingredient company, right? We can think of a major multinational like Croda, right? You might mention Croda in your work for any number of reasons. And if you just link the company name Croda, that's great, right? You can choose whatever page on their website makes sense to go to. But it's not going to be as helpful for your reader or for search purposes than it would be if you say like cosmetic ingredient maker Croda and literally link all of those terms, right? So some sort of fuller explanation is not only going to help your reader understand why you're talking about that company or that ingredient or that thing, but also help search figure it out. So sometimes this takes some creative phrasing. You need to, rework a sentence. You might not have a nice little phrase worth linking, but it is worth rewriting some of those phrases and make sure that your links are helpful, as I've said, for both your reader but also for search purposes. Keywords, I mentioned my passion for cosmetic and personal care, sort of as a phrase. But any keywords that are relevant for your reader big picture, but then more specialized, right? So some of the exercises that you've looked at earlier are thinking about your topic or what your reader cares about. Those sorts of things will help you start to decide what your keywords are, right? If you're talking to formulators, you want to find the words that they're searching for, that they're thinking about, right? There was a stretch of time when all anyone wanted was a drop-in alternative, right? So this became a phrase in a lot of work, so that when folks were searching, I want to drop in alternative for XYZ ingredient or that sort of thing, you would use that phrase because it was an expression that someone might be literally searching for. So it's worth thinking about how your audience is talking about this sort of news, and try to pick up those phrases in that language. Um, you can use the Google Trends tool a bit. Um, it's fun to play around with, and I find it, I think, most useful in terms of when we're starting to hear new terminology or emerging language. Trying to decide, for instance, what sort of phrases to use around the circular economy, what sort of phrases to use around longevity, these sorts of things. You can sort of get a sense, if you compare 3 or 4 different terms in the Google Trends tool. I would just caution that regardless of what boxes you check, I always look for like a global search myself because my readership tends to be quite global. But you're looking at like all of search at this point, right? You're not niched into the cosmetics and personal care industry, or you're not niched into cosmetic science or specialty chemicals or sunscreens or what have you. So it's worth keeping that in mind and sort of using your best judgment when you use the Google Trends tool. Um, Another place you might look in terms of choosing your search terms, are just similar publications, right? What else is your reader looking at? And what are the terms that they're using, right? If your reader is based in a certain market, they might use the term beauty care much more often than the term cosmetics, or much more often than the term personal care. So you want to sort of see what is common for your readership. That can be useful. It's also fun if you're looking at other publications to find something different. What can you say that maybe a competing publication isn't saying? Uh, and find something that can really distinguish you there. If you know that you're writing about a particular type of peptide or something, and there's a phrase or a term that you could be using, or that you might use in conversation when you're describing it to someone, and you're not seeing that in a competing publication, that's an opportunity to stand out, because someone is searching. I have a question. How quickly do you think new technology will gain acknowledgement? Terminology, rather. So I do, as I've said, like to write about emerging science. I like to write about very novel technologies. So again, this is going to depend on your reader, I think. So how quickly does new terminology gain acknowledgement? It takes a long time. And that's from my perspective, because I'm very much on sort of the back end, if I'm looking at a forward-facing trend for an ingredient company, ingredient companies are making the ingredients before the manufacturers are developing the formulations, before the brands are taking it to the consumer, before the consumers are starting to adopt it. So, for instance, one of the earliest sort of trend prediction videos I did when I was working at cosmetics design, probably in 2014, 2015, I was talking about pro-aging. Now, pro-aging didn't hit the consumer market for years, right? So was anyone searching for this? Sort of a handful of the right people, definitely to a certain extent my reader, but did it catch on? Yes and no, right? We do see pro-aging products on the shelf. Literally, pro-age is a branding term. I think L'Oreal has a product line that's pro-age, but of course we see well aging, we see healthy aging. Of course, longevity is super exciting, regenerative beauty, which terms and how they take off. That's sort of a different project. But I think it's worth sort of following and paying attention to. If you're worried, if you are writing content and you see the terminology change, right? If you wrote a bunch of stuff about, I don't, but you realize that longevity may have been a better word. Don't go back and necessarily correct your work, but don't hesitate to add, a paragraph at the end or even, near the beginning and be very clear that it was added at a later date, but this is why. And you can sort of talk about how you were looking at a concept that wasn't talked about. We hear a lot of people say, for instance, we were clean before clean was a thing. And you can sort of go back into your content and or refresh it in some way, even republishing things. Yeah, someone was talking about the extension of well aging. Yeah, I know. And it really does matter sort of where you are in the in the chronology, right, of how our industry adopts terms and technologies and things. Again, I tend to write about things that are very early in terms of emerging science or novel launches. And I'll feel like, oh God, I've been talking about that forever, and it's always new to someone, right? So it's worth thinking about that and realizing that it's also worth remembering that your reader is not reading everything you write or everything anyone else writes. So it can be really helpful to not only continue to use emerging technology and to refresh topics, but to restate news and context in material that you've shared. Absolutely super important there. Um, I want to talk about first drafts here in this section as well. So, okay, just checking my comments. Thank you. I do appreciate the engagement, and I appreciate your patience with me as I look back and forth between my notes and what you're writing and asking. It's very wonderful to see your engagement. It's nice to know I'm not alone here in video land. Um, so when I think about first drafts, I think it's worth sort of getting your head around what the narrative is. There are going to be plot points in whatever you write, whether it is a super short social post, sort of a mini news item, whether it is a full length, 3,000 word article, whatever it is, there's going to be some sort of narrative, some sort of plot point. Um, I was very, 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 and I might still be resistant to the expression storytelling um, for a long time. In my mind, there's a part of maybe my upbringing that made me believe that stories are not true, right? That stories are somehow fictional, this concept of storytelling. But whether we like it or not, people are communicators, right? We like to talk, we like to write, we like to listen, we like to share. I'm sure someone has already said it that man is by nature a storytelling animal. And so I think it's okay to embrace that concept and really think of your work, whatever format it is, that there's a narrative, there's a story, there is of course messaging, but there are these plot points and what have you. And so you want to, or I find it useful, I should say, to sort of identify what those are. What are the things that you want to make sure you touch on? I was saying earlier, maybe a new manufacturing facility is opening. You might not want to include the fact that it's, an economic boon for the local community if that doesn't make sense for your reader, right? Just because that's something that your interview has turned up or a press release is highlighting doesn't mean that's the right item to share. So you really want to select the plot points that make sense, again, for your writing goals, for your reader, and for the platform that you're on. Pausing. Um, Something here that's not quite a first draft note. but I do want to mention it. That can be very helpful for folks, and even still myself, regularly, in terms of revisions. And this is actually sort of a revision guideline that I use not only in my articles, but I find it incredibly helpful in emails because I think I don't know if this is true for others, but I get very linear in terms of the content I want to share in an email. I'm like, and the thing you really want people to know, or the thing you're really asking, is way down here at the bottom near your email signature. And um, I don't know that everyone's going to take the time to read a full narrative email at this point. So my point here is, even, with a news article that you think there's, something really interesting and you're building towards, an exciting revelation or what have you, you need to sort of go to the end of your story oftentimes if you've done this linear structure and take the pot of gold, right, from the end of the rainbow and move at least, a fistful of it right up to the front, right? You want your reader to say like, this is why I want to read this article. It's going to, update me on the latest regulatory changes, or it's going to help me understand why I might want to use this particular ingredient. Don't sort of save the exciting part for the end. You can, share something very exciting up front, and create more of a linear narrative. Once you've shown people sort of the gold that's coming, they're much more inclined to read a full piece. So um, logical and linear can make sense. I think especially for some of us who are more serious minded, for a lot of, my friends who are scientists, there's very much, sort of a logical progression, a sequence that, makes sense. And we tend to then replicate that in our writing. But it can be really useful to disrupt that in terms of getting and keeping your reader's attention. So not really a first draft tip, but something I definitely wanted to share. Um, so again, if you have questions or comments in the chat, I'm always happy to see those. If you do want to take a few minutes now, bring out the document or note paper that you're working with as we do quick exercises today. Just have a couple of minutes and maybe list out some possible SEO terms. Maybe you thought of words that would make sense for your topic or your business purpose or your reader in particular, as I was describing the reasons for choosing search terms. Maybe you had a headline idea and you can craft something there. If you're ridiculously inspired and a super fast writer, you might start on your first draft, but no pressure there. But do just take a minute and dash off some search engine optimization terms, some possible headlines. If you have questions or ideas you want to share with me in the chat, please feel free to do so. I'll keep an eye on that. Okay, I see. Fantastic. Yeah, so I'll give you just a couple of minutes if you want to add to your document any notes on search engine optimization, any headline ideas you have, or maybe some plot points that you want to cover in a first draft on the topic that you selected. It's snowing here where I am, so I'm enjoying like my little snow globe of a neighborhood as I take my break and have some water. It's quite fun. Um, it's also quite nice that I am not cold. I'm not out there. Um, let's see. Yeah, I have just a couple more notes, I guess, on this topic. For headlines in both search engine optimization, as I think I said, you want to make sure you're thinking of something that might capture your readers' attention, what they might type into Google search. You can think about the sort of hashtags that they follow. Hashtags are keywords, and can definitely be search terms. We talked about looking at other publications. So what sort of news and journals are they reading? What events do they go to? Go borrow keywords and hashtags from trade shows or industry events. Again, words you see being used in common, cosmetic industry specific. I think I've said that several times, but do something topic specific as well. Of course, if you're working to feature a company or a product your own or someone else's, brand specific terms can be very helpful. Benefit specific terms can be valuable. These sorts of things for search and for headlines. So the next aspect I want to cover today is including definitions, including details, and including data in your writing. I know I've asked you multiple times now, who is your reader, right? Why are you writing? And these are really good questions to continue to ask yourself in terms of thinking about the definitions, the details, and the data that you might include in any sort of article, in any press release, in any post or blog that you're creating. Um, you want to take care to explain terms and take care to explain things, um, even if you presume your reader knows. I probably am not quite as careful about explanations and definitions as I was when I first started. Um, and part of that is a conscious decision on my part because I, in some ways, have changed the audience I'm writing to a bit. I certainly still have a number of brand leaders, in my network and in my readership for sure, but not the number of what I would call like absolute novice brand leaders that I once had. When I was writing at Cosmetics Design, I think it was 2015. An event called the Indie Beauty Expo launched, and that was really concurrent with the beginning of the contemporary independent beauty brands movement. And we saw a lot of people coming into beauty to create brands who had not worked in the industry at all before. And so at that point, I covered independent beauty quite a lot, very intentionally, and found myself writing for folks who were not well versed, right, in the industry. And so I felt an obligation to really help educate on terms and ideas that I might not have otherwise explained. But something that I find useful is if it's something that you have learned at some point in your work, it can be worthwhile to share that definition or quick explanation in an article. And of course, you want to try to do it in some sort of artful fashion. You don't want to throw in, one clunky sentence that says something, that does so it takes you out of the flow or out of that storytelling narrative that we were discussing. But yeah, take care not to presume that your reader knows too much. Uh, Sorry, I just want to have a quick chat look here. Um, Something that can be really helpful if there are acronyms, if there are common expressions, um, companies or even industry trade shows, you want to explain what those things are. When I was speaking earlier about including hyperlinks and making sure that you chose text to link that made sense for search and to help guide your reader, those sorts of explanations, right? Reminding people that this is an ingredient company, reminding people that this is a contract manufacturing firm, reminding people that this is, a company that's based in Germany, reminding people that it's a company based in Thailand, whatever it is, you want to share information. No one can keep track of everything, unless they're literally just reading news on, three companies, that's all they care about. Maybe they have like a really encyclopedic knowledge, of their niche interest. You want to help your reader contextualize, right? So include those details that will help folks contextualize what they're reading. They can put context into the subject, into the story. You really want to shape it out that way, and that gives you I think much more robust content, much more readable content. And this is a key piece to making it much more accessible. I'm going to scroll back and see if we can find that question or comment about um, making sure. Not sure I'll be able to see it quickly enough. But we do want to make sure that what you're reading is interesting and accessible to folks, and that's really a key piece of it. Is not assuming that folks know too much, or not assuming that they can remember. I mean, I mean, I should give myself more credit than I probably do for everything that I remember, and the people and companies I have in my memory. But there's just so much, right? I hear all the time that the cosmetic and personal care industry is a small world, and to be sure it is, right? We don't want to. I think people say that when they're talking about networking and careers. You don't want to burn any bridges. You definitely will see that person again. You will work with them again in another role or capacity, for sure. So you want to sort of keep your professional friends. I think that's good advice. But there are always new people in the industry. There is always new information. There's always more. There's always different. There's always somewhere else. There's always something else. And so just imagining that anyone has all of that in their mind as they're reading an article is ridiculous. So do offer context clues about the topic, about the subject, as well as about things you're mentioning. And like I said, if you ever learned it, it might be worth mentioning it for sure. And I don't write a lot of financial news stories, and I don't presume that my readers are this isn't going to sound polite, but I would apply it to myself. Not necessarily the most financially literate. I'm not remarkably financially literate in terms of terminology. So if I write about, a new, news of funding or some sort of news on financial results, I'm going to define a lot of topics. And part of that is helping me understand and learn the story as I'm gathering information. But part of that's also sort of recognizing that my reader doesn't see a lot of that content from me. And maybe they don't know what that acronym means, or maybe you've heard it 100 times and you understand what it is and what it means, but you don't know. And I think it can be really useful to just give a couple sentences that really help clarify that. Um, in terms of data, if we're talking actual data, this is something it is super important to always attribute your data very clearly, right? So talk about the source, talk about the study, talk about the figures if there are details that again can put the data into better context, right? If you are talking about clinical testing studies or any sort of consumer um, my brain just stopped. But sort of consumer experience data, be clear about that, and make sure you are clear about where it came from. But data can something interesting about data, and this is probably true of a lot of different sorts of supporting content. But data can be used in a couple of ways. And again, this is going to make my elementary school teachers cringe, and maybe some of the classical journalists here on the call as well. But you can use data to support a story, right, or a news item that you've crafted, right? You've looked at a headline or a topic, that you're interested in covering. You've thought about who your reader is, and then you can sort of go find data that supports the narrative that you're sharing, or that might be particularly relevant to your reader. Or you can do it the other way, right? You can start with data as your discovery point. Gather a lot of information about it, read it, figure out sort of what it's telling you, and then showcase that data in some way, in which case, the descriptions and the definitions and what have you are going to be things that then support the data. Then you can go and look for examples, in the marketplace or through interviews or what have you that then support the data. So you can use it sort of in either way, as that makes sense. If you have questions on that, definitions, details, and data, see that's me being, I do a lot of alliterations. It annoys me, but I love it. I can't stop. I do a lot of things in threes. So you're already learning to love or not my own style of writing. But feel free to have your own, because I think it does add personality and character. For this quick little exercise, I would ask you to just take a couple minutes and ask yourself, what do I assume that my reader knows? Are there terms or acronyms or events I'm mentioning? Um, and I would also say resist any sort of tendency you might have for whatever reason. Maybe it's sort of a company attitude or something I don't know, picked up from friends and family along the way. But if you think, I was going to say, don't try not to be like elitist about things. If you think your reader should know something, if you're like, well, they should know that. If you hear the back of your brain saying, well, of course, they know that. Of course, they should totally know that. Like, they're not worthy to read my work if they don't know what this means. If you're having any of that sort of feeling, I want you to stop and consider that maybe you should be the one to help them by sharing that explanation or definition. And again, you can do it artfully. You can do it in many times, not even a full sentence. You can weave information in that welcomes them, that educates them, that makes your writing more accessible. Um, so I see here in the chat terms like sulfate free or paraben free, right? These are very sort of much buzzword phrases at this point, right? They're very buzzy and people, like to hear these. But they could definitely be, depending on the article, right, very quickly explained or very carefully explained, depending on the focus of what you're writing about and who you're writing for again. So yeah, terms like this, are great. And again, acronyms, events, any sort of notes there. Does anyone else want to share terms that you might be assuming your reader knows or terms that you might want to include with definitions or explanations? These are all bits and pieces, we could say, that will make your writing more useful and really add meaningful context. Is there data that you could include that would actually help your reader do something with the information in your writing, right? Instead of just sharing it, is there a way that you can include data that makes it much more actionable instead of just informative? And is that appropriate for your reader? For sure. Catching up in the chat. Hi, Rita. I'm so glad you could join me. I can't imagine. I think you have a fun time zone too, but maybe you're in a fun time zone where you're actually you're just in the future, which I enjoy. And MOCRA and TGA, and just assume people know them. Yeah. The amount of people who don't is huge. Yeah. And I think it is really important. We get so familiar with the terms and concepts that we're knowledgeable about and what we're writing about. And this is a great opportunity too. I think when you start breaking down acronyms or terms like this, it can help tremendously with search terms as we were thinking about earlier, right? So if no one knows, is it the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulations Act or something, right? If you don't use the term regulations in your work at all, someone who's searching for new information on regulatory topics probably isn't going to find it until they learn to look for MOCRA. And so depending on who you're speaking to, you're not speaking to them if you don't include these sorts of definitions and what have you. So I think that's an excellent point. I appreciate your sharing that. So yeah, any more questions or comments on that? Very welcome in the chat. Um, uh, Oh, and I wanted to say too, I'm also happy to answer questions you might have about the 5-day course that I'm teaching in February, which I mentioned earlier. That's a course where I'll have the chance to go much more deeply into cosmetic industry news writing. If you have questions about that or things you would like me to be sure to cover rather, or include in that 5-day training. Like I said, we'll have much more time to go in depth. So please let me know what would be useful for you. That could be helpful. So yeah, Clara is saying, isn't it better to just assume the reader does not know? Absolutely, absolutely. Assume the reader doesn't know, but in a very polite way, right? You want to, like I've said, welcome them and include them and educate them without, giving the impression that they know nothing, right? Or sharing, so much or being really pedantic about it. You want to make sure that it is, woven into your narrative in a way that is refreshing and enjoyable to read and comes with a lot of the material that is actually your news or is the topic you're covering. Of course, if you're doing an explainer piece, right, if this is what is MOCRA that you're writing, then that's going to look a little different. But at the same time, there will be definitions and what have you. So absolutely, yeah. You just have to. I think the key there, Clara, is recognizing, right, what your reader might not know. I think that's where a lot of us get stuck, is assuming if I know, they know, or not even realizing what you have learned over time. That's that that can be a real challenge. Like I said, I've been doing this for over 10 years now. So what one does start to assume everyone knows what inky means. And yeah, a lot more people know what inky means in the consumer space than maybe they did. But I'm not writing for a consumer. If I were still writing for a lot of new brand leaders or folks coming into beauty, as I said I was years ago, I would take care to define terms like that much more regularly. Pausing for a drink of water. I just heard something this week that a lot of the dialogue on Netflix programs is being written to explain what's happening on the screen, like pausing to drink water, because they are fully aware that their audience is often multitasking and in many cases looking at another screen. So if there's not an explanation or there are these moments of silence, without explanation, it goes ununderstood. So something I perhaps might weave in, although I really appreciate the chat. I'm fully confident I have your attention, but you might not be staring at the screen. Um, let's see. Oh, I was thinking, I made this note, thinking ahead to the 5-day course that I'm offering in February. And this is true for all of you here today, and certainly for anyone who joins that course as well. But this is my first time running this training. So this little lovely group of you, 20 plus individuals who have joined today, and those of I am going to share a replay that will be available for a very limited time with folks who requested it. So there will be some other folks who have the benefit of this, but you will forever be my first students. And so if you continue on with me next month in the 5-day course, I can assure you that my investment in you will be uh, I guess I should say you will have my full attention in a very special way, right? I very much want that course to be valuable to you. I want to do my best to inform you, answer your questions, support your learning, really, and encourage you to add your voice and your content to the cosmetic industry media landscape. I am on your team. That 5-day course that I'm running in February on cosmetic industry news writing, it's not only an opportunity, I think, to improve your skills and your confidence, but I tell this to people about almost everything we do. It's a relationship building opportunity, right? I'll be live with you every day. It's February 17th through the 21st. I will be on your team all week. And I think I know myself, it's fair to say you and everyone who goes through this course will be part of each other's team and professional network for the foreseeable future. So I'm super excited to see you online again next month. And as I said, um, I'm the writing expert. I'm not the tech expert. I was not able to put together a link for you myself, but I do have someone working on that. Thank you. Some of you are already promising to continue learning with me, and I really appreciate that. I I'm so excited that you're interested in learning this, and I'm very passionate about helping you meet your goals and objectives. Yeah, I'm so excited. If we're not available for those dates, are you doing it on other dates? I do hope to be able to run it several times throughout the year. This will sort of depend on engagement. I have to be honest. But if there is an appetite for it, I will do my best to continue there. Bear with me as I read more in the chat. Yeah, so someone's asking, if they're not necessarily has a platform for writing. Clara is messaging me. I feel like my focus is for people who want to be writing in some fashion for their work. Um, and again, I plan to expand on what we're covering here and provide more details that could be useful, and maybe we can do more interactive exercises and get a little bit closer to actual writing if that's of interest. to you. If you like to do that sort of work live, we can incorporate it if you prefer, sort of note taking and going back to your desk. I know that's a, perfectly valid learning style too. Um, but the course is definitely for people who want to or need to incorporate writing in some form or fashion in their work. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be a blog or, trade media articles. Maybe you're writing internal content. Maybe you need to write for, your colleagues or what have you. Knowing that will help me make sure I'm sharing good information that can be useful. If you're not interested, if you don't have to do writing, unless you're, yeah, I don't think I was going to say even like emails, but I think for the most part our emails are not news articles and wouldn't necessarily have the same thing. So if writing is not a key piece of your work, it's probably not for you. I'm very much interested in helping support folks who are looking to, write news in some capacity, as I suggested, very business to business content. So more on the industry side, focused on, blog content, trade media news, social posts, press releases, even to be sure. And I do that not to exclude anyone, but because that's the experience I have. That's what I can teach you about most directly. Those are the sorts of content that I am very confident that my work has been successful in, right? Not only in terms of successful, in terms of, it's given me a career. It's certainly been my income, for as long as I've been in the industry. But it's also successful in that it's useful for my readers and useful for clients or folks that I've worked for. Quickly. A reminder of the dates. I'm looking at February 17 through February 21. So that will be the 5-day course dates. And like I said, I will have a link for you as soon as I can. I have someone developing that for me now so that there's a clear registration strategy. I know many of you were very patient with me in my manual emailing or messaging on LinkedIn, and I'm very grateful for you. But I hope I can and automate this and make it easier for all of us going forward. Yeah. I'm creating content for colleagues, creating content on social makes very good sense. And I think it's an excellent place to start. I think some people sort of overlook the power of social media to just have a basic conversation. You don't need to be, sort of loud and promotional or have any particular agenda. And I will say this, long before I got into the beauty industry, I joined a professional organization. I'm just trying to remember. It wasn't necessarily about writing, but it was about communications. It was a communications focused for communications professionals. Now, I learned all sorts of things. They had great events, and I got to participate in leadership opportunities and had a very good experience in that organization. But the most valuable thing I gained was learning how important it is to be visible and vocal in your work. I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was going to lead to for me. But I always knew I wanted to show up. I wanted to have an audience. I wanted to have some sort of a platform and reputation and exposure. And I will say, what I did know, or what I did appreciate, even as I was starting to realize how important it was to sort of build your online presence or to build your public speaking presence or to have a voice sort of outside of your desk or your office. So many people that I saw, whether it was, and when I say saw, I'm going to say, were news people that I heard on the radio, or even this might sound silly, but like the meteorologists that we see, producing weather reports on television, right? That there were, and oftentimes for me, it was very much a women, sort of uh, focused or women who I was very much impressed by and inspired by, right? That these women were speaking up and standing out and sharing their voice, sharing their perspective, sharing their expertise. Maybe they weren't getting it right all the time, but they were there, they were being seen and heard, and it was very impactful for me. Um, I needed to see that, and I hope that my showing up is useful for other people in that way, and I think it can be very useful. Excuse me, I get emotional about everything. But like I think it can be very useful in terms of sort of personal and career fulfillment, but also you're doing a huge service for someone else and someone else you might never know. And I know it sounds silly and it can seem like a very small thing, but you don't know how impactful it is for others to see you speaking up and speaking out. So let me catch up in the chat. Um, Oh, someone is asking for Google Meet. Noted. I know I know different companies have different platforms and what have you. Those sorts of notes will be very helpful. So if you do have sort of platform preferences, you can add that in the chat. I will do my best to accommodate. I can't promise at this point, but I am definitely going to take everyone's feedback into consideration. Yeah, it feels weird putting yourself out there at first, but it absolutely works. I mean, it's very true, right? And I think a lot of folks, science professionals, creative professionals, people who have considered themselves writers, we tend to do what we might think of as very isolated work, and so I think it is very important to sort of step out from behind the desk, step out from wherever you are, and share more. I'm going to try to zoom ahead. I see I've fallen off time, so bear with me. That's what I get for waxing poetic, right? Okay. Um, the next topic I want to make sure we cover is desk research, interviews, and commentary. So again, I would recommend here, as you're trying to include research that you conduct at your desk. That's what desk research is, right? A lot of Googling, as you might suspect. Of course, you can use other sorts of materials as well. One can read things on paper, or other techniques, I suppose, as well. For me, desk research is a lot of online work, interviews and commentary. So again, start with your topic. And here I would basically just say add color, right? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for things that make your article, your news item, whatever you're sharing, more dynamic, more interesting, more contextualization. As I suggested with data, right? You can either sort of use data to support a narrative or find a narrative by looking at data. You can do that same thing with research and interviews, right? You can know what you want to write about and then pull together the pieces that help you tell the story or create those plot points, or share good examples. So you can sort of support a concept that way, or you can do it in reverse, right? You can do a lot of research. Maybe you're at a trade show and research is talking to, 10 or 20 different people, and what you uncover from those conversations then becomes what you write. And you didn't know what you were going to cover. And this happens to me all the time. If you've ever caught me on the trade show floor, you've probably heard me say, like, people ask me, well, what's most exciting? What have you seen? What are you going to write? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know yet. Like, I'm just here to find out. Like, it's literally what I'm doing there. So you can go in either direction, and I certainly do with my work. Either start with a topic and support it with research, interview, and commentary, or vice versa. Start with a real discovery process. Again, similar to what I was saying with data, do be mindful of your sources. Attribute anything that you quote. If you're taking word for word from someone's conversation, or from something written, you must quote it and you must say that you're quoting it. If you paraphrase, right? If you are just rephrasing something that you have read or heard from someone else, please attribute that as well. Be very mindful of your sources, and it's not going to detract at all from your expertise or your perspective, right? In fact, it's only going to enhance people's trust in you. And I have to say that sort of curation of information is one of the most valuable things we can do in terms of content. Someone's asking if anecdotes rather qualify as color in business to business content rather. And I think having opinions, right? This idea of commentary is something that it's relevant. I think if you choose to do it, it has to sort of fit within your style, right? So if this is material you're developing for a company blog or for social media, if that's sort of the voice of your business or the voice of your platform, absolutely. And maybe you have different sorts of content, right? Where there is something with more commentary or opinion or personal anecdotes. And then there's other content that's a little bit more straight news, and you've differentiated them in some fashion. Yeah, I think we need more voices and things. I do caution people with commentary, and this might apply to anecdotes as well, Matt, but I think, and I don't know if this is something you would do at all, so forgive, I'm certainly not calling you out. I'm just pointing to something I have noticed and that doesn't resonate with me, and that is that cynicism or sort of antagonistic content only gets you so far, right? I think we know that in terms of a search and what we think of as clickbait or getting sort of numbers and clicks and readers and eyes on the page, being sensational in some fashion or cautionary, like, these are the 10 things you're doing wrong, or clearly you're stupid if sort of headlines and pieces. I think that only gets you so far, and you're only going to attract a reader or a customer that has sort of that similar attitude. So I would just caution with commentary, opinion pieces, anecdotes that you're sharing material that supports the aims of your work, and speaks to the person that you want to be writing for. If that person does not sort of share your anger or your cynicism, I say leave that out. I tend to be a very overly empathetic and generous writer and interviewer. As I've said, I think all of our opinions and perspectives are very relevant, and I hope they can continue to show up. So I think anecdotes and commentary are super relevant. I think they're very important in terms of, as I've said, sharing sort of personality, sharing the character of you as an individual, sharing sort of the attitude and approach of your company, whatever it is. But just take care that it's an attitude that you want to be, you want to be sharing. Just be thoughtful in that regard. As I've said, attribute your sources. This can include, market research reports or trend forecasters, consumer behavior data. Always make sure, explanations if you're reflecting someone else's research or writing, that you're very clear there. And the same is true for interview content, right? If you conduct an in-person interview, an interview by phone, by video call, something even via email. Of course, you want to attribute that. In terms of interviews, especially in the digital age, we do a lot more on email or, video call or what have you. My only caution there would be, if you're newer and maybe don't have a larger industry network, or if you're reaching into a topic or category or sector that you're maybe less familiar with, do take care to be confident of your sources, right? So that if this is someone who says they work for XYZ company, you have confirmed that in some alternate way, that that you're speaking with someone who can represent a company or can appropriately be given the title that they're telling you they have. And if you're doing desk research and that sort of thing, you always want to work with reputable websites or platforms, and it can be very, very smart to confirm the data or the information that you've found through research in multiple reputable sites, and reputable. You want to find something that is commonly trusted in whatever field you're looking at, right? You don't want to, you might find a blog that says something that could be very useful and can lead you to, good information, and it could be good research worth sharing. But make sure you actually confirm it through other platforms that maybe you're more familiar with or have a, longer standing reputation. You want to make sure that you're sharing good information, because you can literally find anything, right? We know, like, something has been said in any direction about any topic. So you want to make sure that you're not just, sharing a statement. You want to make sure you're sharing a statement that's accurate and interesting. So in terms of desk research, interviews, and commentaries, if you just want to add to the notes that you're making throughout our call, ask yourself questions like what information or expert voices does your reader want, right? Who would you reach out to? And this might be who, like, oh, I'm going to go, talk to Susie Smith. Or this might be, I know I need to talk to a cosmetic scientist who specializes in hair care, right? So who you want to reach out to, can be a specific person if you know who that is, if you have those contacts at this point, or it can be, this is the sort of person I might search for to include interviews or commentary in my piece. What sort of reports or published material could you read through to find useful information? If you do want to share your opinion or perspective or an anecdote, dash out, write out here, now on your notes or on the document you've created, what are your thoughts, and then also ask yourself, reflect on the reasoning of your thoughts, right? I think this is a good ingredient. Well, why do you think it's a good ingredient? Are you interested in its, environmental attributes? Are you invented in its sensorial profile? Are you interested in, how it's being sourced or, the ethics behind it? Scrolling. Yes. Okay. Some folks are stepping away, and that's lovely. I appreciate everyone who's stayed here, and I will go through the chat and make sure I have all your information later. Be sure. Yeah. So feel free if you want to add any expert voices or notes on this or further questions about including commentary, interviews, or desk research. You can add that um, in the chat. I did mention at the start of the call that I want to give each of you a chance to have a free one-on-one call with me. Um, we can have more personalized conversation, asking really specific questions or talk about aspects of writing that we didn't get to in the training. If you do want to go ahead and have a one-on-one call with me, I need you to send me an email. Um, just a second, I'm going to make a note so I can drop it in the chat for you. Um, um, So two things in the email. So I want you to email me if you'd like to have a one-on-one private call with me in the next couple few weeks. And in that email, I want you to ask if you haven't already, and if you have, you can let me know, but subscribe to the Beauty Insights newsletter that I send each week. It's completely free. It goes out on Thursdays. It's very short and digestible. You can read it on your phone. You don't have to click away to anything else. Um, so ask to be subscribed to Beauty Insights, and I will gladly make that happen for you. And then the second thing I want you to include in the email is just let me know what your favorite thing about today's training was. I'd really like to know what resonated with everyone, what makes sense for me to focus on that will help me. So there's my email address in the chat. Like I said, just drop me an email, a request to be subscribed, or if you're already a subscriber, thank you very much. I appreciate all of you tremendously. And then also let me know what your favorite thing about today's training was. And you can share as much or as little as you like. All the feedback you're willing to give me, I am going to be thrilled to read through. But go ahead and do those two things. Send me the email subscribing to Beauty Insights, my weekly newsletter, and telling me what your favorite thing or your top takeaway is from today's training. And I'll go ahead and send you a link to schedule a private call with me. Time time is of the essence. There is some limitation on space. I hope I get the chance to speak with all of you. Do go ahead and email me as soon as we finish the training today to get a spot on my calendar, because I am very much looking forward to the opportunity to connect with each of you and learn what your challenges, what your interests are in writing, and continue to help and support you as best I can. When we speak, I will definitely also have the course link for the 5-day February course available then. So be sure to ask for that if you're interested if you haven't already seen it. Are there questions coming in about commentary and interviews? Let me know. Um, you're welcome for the call offer. I am genuinely interested, and I will be just as chatty and excited to help support you when we have a private call as well. So let's see. We're almost on schedule. I'm reasonably impressed with myself. Okay, so the last aspect of writing I want to run through is finding your voice or your niche or your specialty. And this has a lot to do, with that idea of anecdotes almost that we were talking about earlier, Matt. But this has to do with very much who you are and who is your customer. I say customer because at some point your reader is your customer, and it's worth starting to sort of think about that. They are, buying in to what you do. Um, and you want to make sure that you're serving them in a way that makes sense. But you also want to be true to who you are. I've shared a couple notes that I sometimes I can't stand, like the poetry that I put into my own writing. Like I get very obsessed about the rhythm of my work, and I read a lot of my own content out loud as I'm working on it, or when I'm sort of doing a final edit. And the cadence of what I write is personally important to me. I don't know if anyone who's ever read my articles notices or cares, right? But it's part of how I work, and I'm not going to sort of take that away from me. It's very much a piece of my voice. But it's worth thinking about, sort of beyond those stylistic details, right? What matters to you, personally, and some of you have shared that. And what do you want to write about? What's important. I've shared with you that, ingredient science is one of my favorite topics, but I cover news much more broadly, and I'm starting to recognize that for me, the opportunity to learn is just really huge, right? Like I can get very excited about packaging, but I'm mostly very excited about packaging when I'm learning about new material technologies or really out of the box design. There are some things about it that I'm not as excited about, and that's fine. There are plenty of other people in the industry who are terribly passionate about it. I know it's being covered very well for the readers, who seek that. I'm learning more and more all the time about the machinery that is used in manufacturing and packaging, and I love machine. Like I love I have actually have a university degree in automotive technology, and so I am always thrilled to learn how things work, and to see the machinery. So that's something I know about myself, and it's very important to sort of think those things through and feel them, because your work is going to be most effective if you enjoy it, and if it makes sense. So who do you want to write for? What do you want to write about? Why do you want to write? For me, it is very much about sharing information. It is about helping different sets of experts communicate with one another, even though they might not necessarily use the same terminology, or I often use the expression, they might not speak the same language. Which is very true, with cosmetic industry, and I imagine many other industries' terminologies. The same word can mean something totally different if you're talking to someone at an ingredient company, someone at a manufacturing company, someone who's in a brand ownership role, and then of course the end consumer or a retailer might use the exact same word and mean something totally different. That doesn't mean that they're using the word wrong. It just means that their audience is different. And so this is another reason why, including those definitions, the data, the explanations can be very useful, because it really helps your reader sort of locate you as much as it helps locate them and locate the news. So I do encourage, as I think I've said throughout the call today, you to be who you are, to write for whatever reason you're writing. Maybe it's, you have an expertise because of your particular locale, based in a particular market. If you're interested or passionate about that area or market, that can easily be a piece of sort of your niche, or key piece of your voice. If someone has mentioned sunscreens, own the sunscreen space, right? Like, don't just write about your kind of sunscreen. You have the opportunity. If I don't know how much content, and forgive me, I don't recall your name off the top of my head, but like, if you become the go-to person on sunscreen technologies, then of course whatever you're selling or offering, or what have you, is going to be that much more trusted, right? If you only talk about your channel and try to avoid, competitive ideas and competitive knowledge, I think people miss out in that regard. I think it can be very helpful to sort of, be more comprehensive. If people know you are the go-to source for something, whatever that something is, that can be very useful. Trying to be mindful of time. Um, yeah, so a note has come in just, finding that it can be very intimidating to ask for an interview. And I think that's true, except I will say, and this might be cliche, and you maybe haven't sort of learned it through experience. I think often advice becomes much more practical once we start to like feel it. Um, but people like to talk, and people like to talk about themselves, and they like to talk about their work. Um, Honestly, you can take yourself out of it entirely. Um, um, uh, I'm not laughing. It's still definitely something that uh, it can be very difficult, especially if you're looking for an interview or content from a top level person. It can be super intimidating. You know, I'll give an example that I had recently. I was, preparing for my interviews on the Cosmo Factory podcast. I almost always have a short call with the podcast guest before we even record an interview. And sometimes, it's a couple days before, sometimes it's a couple weeks before, whatever, just so I can, refresh on sort of their expertise. It also gives me a chance to sort of feel them out and help support them through our conversation. Um, but I was introduced to someone who was going to be a guest who was, a very top level executive in their company. And it was someone I hadn't spoken to before. I didn't know much about this company. Um, and I was like, okay, I was excited because I knew it was going to be cool. But even during the preparatory call, this person, they were just like, okay, I trust you. Like, this is what you do. It's going to be a good interview. You know your audience, and you do. You have all of that. You bring all of that already. Um, but it can just be super, super intimidating, and it really. I was actually glad that this person didn't want to share much with me in the preparatory call because it made me go back and do research and develop interview questions that turned into a very strong episode that I might not have gotten if they had been a little bit more warmer and welcoming and handed me, here are 5 topics I'd really love to talk about. So um, it's kind of a mixed bag, but I would say, and I want to, like I said, it was a very strong episode of the Cosmo Factory podcast, and that was because I had good interview questions, but it was also because, once you get going in an interview, right, this is material that's going to be shared, whether it's going to be quoted for a print material or whether it's going to be, shared as a podcast or a video or what have you. People are more than happy to, share open information and share good responses. They're going to help you. So uh, don't not interview, and we can talk about that. I think interviewing could be an interesting topic. Lucy loves working with contributors and sources, and the process is much easier as you go on. Uh, Yeah, yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, people are stepping away. I understand. I've shared my email. Yeah, the Cosmo Factory podcast. Thank you, Shanti, for weighing in there. I need the support here in the chat. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, it's Cosmo Factory. It's on any number of platforms wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can go to the Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna website, and you will find the podcast is linked there as well. Um, did I share? I think I did. Did I not share I'm sharing my email information again because I think I passed it on, but it was doing something funny in the chat for me. So running out of time. If anyone wants to actually raise your hand or unmute and ask a quick question, and we can have a quick talk. If anyone wants to speak up, now's our chance. We have about 10 minutes. Before this goes. I can speak to some common questions I get while folks are thinking about bravely coming off mute here. Um, I don't even remember this platform. Do you have the opportunity to raise your hand, or just let me know, or you can make a note in the chat if you want to speak up. One question I get about writing often has to do with deadlines. We all have deadlines in our work, but especially if we're looking at creative processes, it can be a bit challenging or frightening. I definitely acknowledge that. Um, my advice in terms of managing deadlines is actually to learn your process and give yourself the space you need. Um, I think even, the most serious writing, even the most accomplished professional writers have a creative process, right? And it's going to go better if you're relaxed, if you're close to or in what they call a flow state. You're going to have a much easier time of meeting deadlines and actually enjoying the work. And when you do enjoy the work, you're creating content that people are going to feel. They know that when they're reading it, that's going to come through. So in terms of know your process, really take time, whether it's making notes or just even mental observations. Learn to become very self-aware of your process and what your mind needs, your body needs. Are there certain details? Do you need, a certain sort of music? Does a certain sort of music help you write well? Do you do it well in crowded spaces? Do you do it well, in private? There are going to be different details. One example for me, a little bit less about environment, but sort of process. My brain needs a lot of breaks in between. Like if I'm transitioning from one article to a next article, or even if I'm moving from sometimes sort of one subheading within an article to a next, or I'll spend way too much time crafting that clever headline and need a break. Maybe it's a 2-minute break or a 3-minute break, but I've come to know that about myself, that my brain wants a moment to sort of regroup and pivot. And this, I so I'm just kind to myself about it. I don't think, well, why aren't you focusing? Why aren't you staying, on task and at your desk? And maybe I want to scroll social media for 3 minutes. Maybe I'm working from home. Maybe I want to, go wash the dishes. But I know, don't get sucked into Instagram and lose 2 hours. I know that I'm just taking a quick break, and I know that it's useful for my writing. I know that when I'm done with the dishes, I'm coming back and writing the next paragraph. So be aware of your process and give yourself the grace and the space you need for sure. Yeah, thank you. Some of the folks are stepping away. I completely understand that. Um, Other common questions I get. Uh, we talked a little bit about, creating a style if you're writing for yourself. Various publications, if you're looking at being published in conventional trade media, are going to have style guides. A lot of journalists sites that are structured as conventional journalism will follow the Associated Press or AP manual of style. Um, Again, that's conventional journalism. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very effective, but be aware of that. And you can sort of, even if you don't want to learn the AP style, you can sort of make those observations, into, how other content on their site is structured and start to feel that out. Or if you have the opportunity to work with an editor, you will start to see that that's, something they do quite often. That sort of thing. I personally, my first sort of style guide I learned was the Chicago Manual of Style, and I'm a huge fan of the serial comma. Um, so my style guide is sort of my personal style guide at this point. I've definitely built things in that are personal, but I'm not adverse. If I'm writing for a particular publication and an editor needs to change things, like I don't mind going to press without the serial comma. I'm fine. So, that sort of thing. Just checking the chat. If anyone has further questions or comments, feedback, I'm super, super happy to take any of that at this time. Sometimes there are concerns about grammar if you're writing in a language that maybe, you are not super fluent in, or maybe, is your second or third language. My only comment there is really to focus on making sure that your meaning is clear. Depending on your platform and reputation, conventional writing skills might not be that important. As long as something cannot be, misinterpreted in 3 to 6 ways. Thank you. You're welcome, guys. I'm really glad to see you all here, and I appreciate that you're interested in what I have to share, truly. So, yeah, don't worry about grammar. And, I mean, I mentioned, other, speaking, maybe not writing in your native language or what have you, but even if you are writing in a native language and you have more of a dialect or a colloquial way of saying things, like Not a lot of people know this. In fact, some people are surprised to learn that I'm from the US. I'm always kind of enchanted by that. But I actually grew up in eastern Montana in a very rural community here in the US out west. And there are still very sort of colloquial expressions that make their way into my writing from time to time. It's kind of, some people will say, well, when you get on the phone with your mother, right, you can hear your native accent or phrases you might use start to come out. I think that's, something common that happens to a lot of us. And so yeah, there are definitely, turns of phrase, and it's just a matter of being aware of what you're saying and making sure that, again, your meaning is clear for your reader. There's no sort of right way to write in any language. You know, like I said, you have to make sure your is clear. Someone's asking about articles or blogs that are AI generated, and obviously doing so with the writing style and coherence. So I don't. This is gonna be the wrong answer. I kind of don't care what anyone else is doing. Like I don't get excited about what anyone is doing. I think using AI is perfectly fine and fabulous. I'm a fan of artificial intelligence, and it definitely has. It's a tremendous resource for research, a tremendous resource for writing prompts, for actually, crafting some sorts of content. 100%. I am not opposed to AI. I think at this point it is still an emerging technology. And so it's something that if you use while you're writing an article for research or for, to sort of get you started, or a phrase, or if you actually, draw content directly from it, don't be afraid. In fact, I very much encourage you to say this article was crafted with the help of AI. If you want to, share the name of the platform that you're using, if you want to even, create a little paragraph that you put at the bottom of every article explaining how you're using it. Again, much like attributing, research data or interview material, it's only going to add to your credibility. It's only going to make you stand out as a more honest and transparent person. So if AI is right for you to use it. If you're doing so, and you're sharing enough of it in your work, if it's not just sort of an inspirational search or an alternative thesaurus for you, which it can be fun for, be sure you say that. I think it's only a good thing. Trying to be mindful of the time. My biggest challenge about writing in a fast-paced industry. Um, phew, I'm pausing. I want to tell you the truth. My biggest challenge. Um, I mean, I think my biggest challenge is that, like, there's too much. That's my biggest challenge, is there's too much, and I am way too excited about it. I sit down to write something like, I'm developing. Cross your fingers. I'm developing a project with a trade show that I've gotten to consult for several years now. And so hopefully I'll get to do that later this year. And I've selected the topic, right, for the project, and I've written sort of a description blurb, and I'm already, imagining, the sorts of, companies and brands and technologies that I want to include. And I always like, I want to write the most comprehensive piece, and do this really great activation around this topic. There is no way, right? Even if we look at some of the most niche ideas that each of you shared for topics, that you could cover everything about it in any sort of, succinct or compact way. So that's my biggest challenge, is deciding, or letting myself not include everything, letting myself hit publish and know this is not, the comprehensive piece on this topic. So that's a great question. Thank you, Sophia. I just want to thank you, everyone who's hung on here till the end. Thank you so much for making time to join me here today. I've tremendously enjoyed our time together. I hope you found this training valuable. We did cover 6 aspects of writing. You can apply to any business-to-business news format. I know you don't have a finished article, but I hope many of the pieces that you need to finish the puzzle of an article or blog or post are there in your document, or the notes you've been taking. The 5-day February course will build on everything we've learned today. I will have that link available to you soon, and I know we're in touch everywhere. So I will be sure to share that link with you. I would love to see you online again next month, and to help work with you to reach your writing goals. I thank you so much for your time today. Lots of thank yous in the comment. I really appreciate it. a target-rich environment. Very true. There's so much to be shared here in the industry. Oh, thank you, Sophia. I appreciate hearing that. That's very kind of you to say. Yeah, no, and I do. If you see me at an event, even if I've seen your face here online, I might be so overwhelmed by all the interesting technologies I'm trying to discover. I might not recognize you, but please say hi. Take time. I will always have time to speak with you for sure. Do introduce yourself whenever you see yourself. Thank you all so much. Super happy for this, and I look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing you all again online next month. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.